Hello, everybody. This is Trevor Hall here, and I'm sitting with Vista Gold CEO Fred Earnest. It is May 24th, 2018, and I'm happy to have you, Fred.
Trevor, it's great to be here. Thank you.
We wanted to get together and just provide a little bit of an interview and some insight to shareholders in the investment community about some of the recent news and updates with Mt Todd. So I guess we'll just get started real quick. You've mentioned some more exploration programs happening at the Mt Todd property. Is that something we can look forward to this summer, or is this already underway?
We're just out of the wet season right now. We're just getting ready to start. We're excited about the programs. We've got a target that we're going to drill called the Wandy target. That's an IOCG style of mineralization, iron oxide copper gold system. We've had consultants in and advised us on our previous results. We believe we need to drill deeper. We're waiting to finalize some of the IP interpretation, some geophysical work that we've done. And the consultants are going to be on site again the weekend after this. And after that visit, we hope to be able to finalize drill locations and drill program and finalize our arrangements to have a rig on site. So that's something that hopefully we'll be able to commence late June, early July. Results, we should start seeing some results sometime in August.
And where is that in relation to the Mt Todd project, if you were looking at it at a map?
Yeah, so if you look in our corporate presentation, we have a map of the exploration licenses that we hold, and you'll see that the Wandy project is exactly due north of the Batman deposit, and it's about 15-20 kilometers north of the project.
Okay.
So it's easy access from the site, and just north, it's within the 1,100 square kilometer package that we have.
Very interesting. What other project developments are you working towards achieving this summer?
You know, right now we continue to work on small metallurgical test programs. We've just finished some grind size work with larger samples with the two manufacturers of the regrind mills. And one of those tests is going to be it's going to go on to a second stage, and we're waiting for leach test results. I hope in the next 3 to 4 weeks, perhaps we'll be able to announce the results of that. Right now, it looks as though that 60 micron grind size is going to be very easy to achieve. We may achieve a finer grind size than that, which will has the potential to increase recovery even more than what we previously announced.
Oh, interesting. So can you explain like how that was different than what was previously announced with the grinding circuit announcement? I think it was back in the winter, wasn't it?
So, we all the test work we did last fall leading up to the completion of the updated preliminary feasibility study, we redesigned the grinding circuit, implemented a second stage of grinding or regrinding. And the initial test work suggested that we would be able to achieve an 80% particle passing size of 60 microns. We've sent bulk samples to both Glencore and Outotec to test the Vertimill and the Isomil, which we've selected. And the initial results indicate that they're achieving the target grind size with less energy than what we had estimated. And that they're actually getting a finer grind size than what we'd targeted. And that's all very encouraging. We'll be doing some more work on that.
Very good. And under the recent PFS, you have shown very positive economics with a $1,300 gold price. Earlier this week, we saw gold dip below that price, but now spot price as time of recording is about $1,304, so we're seeing a bump from that. But is this a challenge? Was this a challenge for Mt Todd and Vista Gold to see that dip below that $1,300 gold price at all?
Oh, maybe a disappointment, but not a challenge. Certainly, our project benefits from a higher gold price.
Sure.
We have considerable leverage. The higher the gold price goes, the better it is for the project. We used $1,300 because we felt that was something close to what would be a floor, and that we were being conservative in projecting the most conservative estimate. We were hopeful that we'd see a floor maintained at $1,300. Obviously, with the news today, Gold is back up above 1,300. We're happy to see that. I think the reason that why we weren't concerned about it is that we have two considerations. We watch gold price, but we also watch foreign exchange rate. Both factors are important to us. And while the gold price dipped below 1,300, the exchange rate in the past months has been considerably below the 80-cent exchange rate that we used in our PFS.
And just to clarify, that's the Australian exchange rate.
Yeah, that's the
dollar.
Australian US dollar, Australian exchange rate. We used 80 cents. Today, the exchange rate is about 75.7 cents. And so, that the advantages from foreign exchange rate definitely outweigh a $10 change in gold price below our target price for the PFS. We're not worried.
Okay, all right, good. We recently shared some information about Mt Todd being a community-focused, community-based project. You can find that blog on the website. But can you share, just now that I have you in person, what your perspective of Mt Todd actually provides more value to its shareholders as being a community-based project?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many different ways that being a community-based project is beneficial. There's an immense amount of work that's being done in Australia right now, just on the cultural, socio impact side of things. The impacts on families of having the primary breadwinner work on a fly-in, fly-out job, the negative impacts of the family, the divorce rates, the challenges that a family faces just in the family dynamics of not having a mother or father there on a regular basis. Those impacts are hard to quantify. But with regards to, how does this impact our shareholders? Recently, we just looked at the mining side. Just our mining costs. The advantage of being a community-based project saves us 15% on mining costs. We don't have to provide airfare for employees to fly to the site from anywhere in Australia every 2 weeks. We don't have to have a camp. We don't have to provide the accommodations and incur the costs of providing living quarters and meals and basic recreation and laundry facilities and things like that. And we don't have to have the duplication of workforce. When you have a fly-in, fly-out operation, you essentially have two of everybody. Because for every person that's at work, you have another person that's on rest. And so we're able to save an entire crew. Now we have 3 crews, whereas if we were fly in, fly out, we'd have 4 crews. So just looking at those 3 areas, airfare, camp, and employment totals or staff numbers, we save 15%. Our $1.84 per ton mining cost would be something close to $2.10 if we were a fly in, fly out operation. So there's and then take those costs and dribble them across the admin staff and the process plant costs. You can appreciate that being a community-based project provides significant economic advantages. It's one of the reasons that the Mt Todd project is estimated to be in the lowest quartile of costs in Australia, is because we're one of the few projects that's being designed and built using the best technology that's available, the most efficient technology that's available, but also being community-based.
And I'm just curious, what kind of conversations have you had with the local? The local town is called Catherine, but the town of Catherine and their elected officials. Have you had conversations with them about your involvement with the community, with Mt Todd, or is that something that maybe happens in the future?
No, we work very closely with the community. This conversation has been going on for the last 8 years. Yeah. And the local community is very excited about this. We have the support of the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory. He wants to see the economic benefits of projects stay in the community, not be exported to communities like Perth and Adelaide and Sydney and Canberra and Brisbane, because that's where people live, right? He wants to see that the territory receive the economic benefit of the project, and that's one of the things that a community-based project does. in our conversations with the mayor and the town council of the town of Catherine, they've been concerned that there would be land freed up for the appropriate amount of development that would need to take place for construction of new housing. We've worked with the Department of Lands and Planning in Darwin at the territory level to make sure that there will be Crown land freed up for new development. They've already released part of that land as a result of our conversations, so that's already benefited Catherine, and that's a very positive thing. Last of all, we've been very sensitive to the concerns of the community. We will have a temporary camp. The community does not want the construction workforce living in Catherine. They're concerned that these are mobile people who, are used to being in a job in a place for 6 months, 8 months, and then they move on. And so we'll build a camp closer to the mine site to accommodate the construction crews. But as soon as we start to transition from the construction crews to the full-time operational team, those people will be incentivized to live in Catherine, and that's what the community wants, and that's what we aim to do.
Well, that's really great, and it's really great to hear, and I'm sure the people of Catherine are really excited to see this project continue to be developed and underway. Really grow their own community, right?
It's an interesting thing that we face. That when we first acquired the project, we got a lot of questions about how we were handling water. Today, the questions we get from the community are, when are you going to build the mine? How do I apply for a job at the mine? Mm-hmm. The people in the community are very enthused about the prospect of Mt Todd being developed and are looking forward to the employment opportunities that it presents.
Oh, that's great. So, you concluded with the updated PFS back in January of this year. So the next step is, well, I guess the next question is, where does Vista go from here?
Yeah, that's a question that we get asked a lot. What are the next steps? And, we alluded on in the conversation that there's still some testing work going on, that we think there's still some small cost, perhaps high reward optimization activities, and those are in process. And we hope that those will be completed by the end of the summer, North American time. We're with the completion of the updated PFS. We're now in a position to talk about economics and how does the project get developed. And we believe that, this is not the kind of project that Vista should develop on its own. We're not interested in incurring the amount of dilution that would be required for us to go out and finance this on our own. Starting last fall, we started receiving inbound questions from people who could be potential partners, strategic partners in developing Mt Todd. And we've signed confidentiality agreements, and they are now in the process of reviewing data and becoming familiar with the project. And we're starting to get requests for site visits, which is a logical next step. All of this is aimed toward ultimately achieving a strategic end to developing Mt Todd, one that will allow us to be a significant partner in the development of Mt Todd and to reward our shareholders and to create value without significant dilution. That's our goal at the end of the day, is to create value for our shareholders. And right now we think that we can very clearly demonstrate that Mt Todd has characteristics that are unique and rare in our space, and that those attributes are not being recognized by the market, that we truly are undervalued. The Mt Todd project is in a great political jurisdiction, being in Australia, being in the Northern Territory, having the support that we have geographically, 3 hours from the airport in Darwin. This is not a remote site, 30 minutes from the town of Catherine, paved roads to the site, power lines, natural gas pipeline, other infrastructure, the fact that our environmental permits have been approved, and that we're very close to having our preliminary approval of our mine operating permit. All of these things set us aside and should afford us a greater valuation and greater reward for our shareholders. And those are the things that we're working to achieve. And how we do that is that we demonstrate the value of the project, and we help people understand, and hopefully we'll be able to get to the point that we have something that we can announce in the next 6 to 9 months that demonstrates a strategic path forward that is lower risk, low dilution for our shareholders that will help create value for them.
But I want to ask a follow-up question based on the technology that you studied and that you plan on implementing at Mt Todd, including the automated sorting and the grinding circuit technologies that are in place. Did those implementations create a foundation to lend a hand to more of those conversations with potential partners moving forward?
The implementation of technology such as automated sorting, redesigning the grinding circuit have allowed us to achieve the results that have captured people's attention. Last fall, when we started announcing metallurgical test results, announcing the results of the automated sorting program, the expected recoveries from the two-stage grinding circuit, that's when the inbound phone calls started to occur, because people started to be able to connect the dots and to realize that the Mt Todd project is economically more robust today than it was 5 years ago at a much higher gold price. That these things have allowed us to improve the project in a way that we've basically maintained all of the leverage that we have to gold price, but we've shifted the start point $300 to the left on the curve. That today, Mt Todd at $1,300 is a better project than it was 5 years ago at $1,600. Mm-hmm. And it's really, the technology wasn't the driver, but it enabled the results that captured people's attention.
And it might be important to note, and this is a conversation you and I have had just over a phone call, but when the technology specifically with automated sorting, this is not just a technology that's been thought up and you're maybe planning on testing. It's actually been implemented at other mine projects and shown great success.
Everything that we have done at Mt Todd involves the use of proven, demonstrated, off-the-shelf technology. The equipment that we've selected, none of it is next generation, largest in class. It is all of it well proven, off the shelf, something that we could go to visit a mine somewhere in the world and talk to the owner and the operator about what they like, what they don't like, challenges they've found with the piece of equipment, what they've had to do different in operating or maintaining it. It's all of the equipment is that way, including the sorting technology. Mm-hmm. I think that sorting technology is something that we as an industry, we are just starting to embrace. I think that we will be embracing it more openly in the coming years and months. We've had many questions about what we've done, the test work we've completed, and how we came across this, and why it works, and how it works. And quite honestly, we're using equipment that on a feed rate per unit basis is very consistent with what other people who have already adopted this technology are already experiencing. We're not trying to push the envelope, and in most cases, we've selected equipment that's oversized because we want to make sure that even if we experience small problems, that we're not going to be bumping up against the edge of the envelope.
Fred, can you tell me about the shareholder base of Vista Gold? Where are you traded, and what does your shareholder structure look like?
Yeah, so Trevor, you know that we're a Canadian company. We're a BC corporation, but we trade on both the NYSE American Exchange and the TSX under the symbol VGZ. About somewhere between 92% of our shares trade in the United States on the NYSE American, and 8 to 10% trade in Toronto. And that's kind of reflective of our shareholder base. We have, unlike many of our peers who are strictly Canadian listed companies or trade on the pink sheets here in the U.S., we have an NYSE American listing, and most of our shareholders are retail investors based here in the U.S. Somewhere around 35-37% of our shares are held by institutions, mm-hmm. and the balance is held by retail investors, and most of those are U.S. based mm-hmm. investors.
And as a disclosure, I am a shareholder of Vista Gold and have been for a number of years. And I find great benefit in having direct access as an American investor to Vista Gold. Is that something that, do you think more gold companies in the U.S. might look towards more of an American listing or would they still mainly go to Canada?
It's an interesting thing because most projects, most mining companies start out as exploration companies listed on the TSX Venture Exchange or the old Vancouver Exchange. And then as they begin to grow, they get listed on the TSX Exchange, and And I think that most companies want to have exposure to the U.S. markets. Getting that exposure often comes by way of first trading on the pink sheets, which is not as prestigious, it's not as advantageous as having an NYSE listing. And certainly, we crossed that bridge more than a decade ago,
Sure.
and we've enjoyed a U.S. listing that's recognized, and I think we have distinct advantages from that.
So what are some of the benefits and challenges of being a junior gold company traded on the American exchange?
Well, obviously the advantage is that we have exposure to a broader market. Now it's interesting that typically more Canadians invest in resources on a per capita basis than U.S. than citizens of the United States do. But we enjoy exposure to a broader market. Bilateral agreements or agreements between the TSX and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission allow us as a Canadian corporation to continue to report under Canadian standards. We report in accordance with National Instrument 43101 rather than Industry Guide 7. And so there's some advantage to being a Canadian company from that point of view. Obviously, one of the disadvantages of being dual listed is that we have considerably more compliance obligations that we have to comply with, both U.S. and Canadian standards.
More paperwork.
More paperwork, more expense. I mean,
Sure.
That's a disadvantage to the shareholders, that our compliance costs are very significant because of the dual listing.
But the exposure is a little bit better, perhaps?
It's considerably better.
Very good. Is there anything else that maybe it's important for people to know, shareholders or the investment community or even the mining community, to know about Vista Gold and Mt Todd as we wrap things up?
I would every CEO would say that their project is undervalued, Trevor. When we look at the comparative results and we look at things like price per NAV or enterprise value per ounce of measured and indicated resource, Vista very clearly shows up at the bottom end of both of those analyses. And I think that what that indicates, given that what we've talked about today, that this is a well-advanced project in a great jurisdiction that's made some very significant changes in the last 3 or 4 months to report results that are now very, very, very attractive at today's economic conditions. Even though we've seen a bump in the gold price below 1,300, our results are not in jeopardy, and yet we have a situation where the market doesn't appreciate the value of the project. We've been out on the road a lot lately. We've been talking to people. I've spent a lot of time in Europe, on the East Coast, Toronto this week, and the work that we're doing with you to get the word out to those who aren't in those centers. But I think that we have a project that's undervalued, and at some point we'll reach out to the right group that will all of a sudden take an interest in this. And that could be the straw that moves the needle, so to speak, that all of a sudden starts to project us on an upward trajectory to realizing value. And we're not so naive as to think that we should be at the our peer average of 0.5 times price times NAV. Mm-hmm. If we could get to 0.2, we're presently at 0.1. If we get to 0.2, 0.25, 0.3, those are significant gains and a significant improvement in value for our shareholders. Mm-hmm. That's where we're headed. That's what we're working toward. And I would just hope that everybody realizes that there's value in a project here that's unappreciated and unrewarded at the present time.
Well, we'll wrap things up for today. We look forward to news and information coming out about Mt Todd in the next couple months, especially with the exploration program ramping up now that's drying up down there. So thank you so much for your time, Fred, and we appreciate it.
Well, Trevor, thanks for having me, and it's always good to catch up. Thank you.